By the time you get home this evening, another young person may have been stabbed, may even have died. But even if they haven't died, their lives will have been changed forever. Not only their lives, but the lives of their family, their friends, all the people who care for them. And so I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about knife violence in young people, because the statistics are scary. I've got some of them here. Last year, 250 people died from knife injury, and 50,000 offences involving sharp objects took place within England and Wales. And in all of these cases, knives ruin lives. It's a huge problem. Now, I've experienced this from the inside, because the first career I had was as a trauma surgeon. And I've looked after hundreds of young people who've been stabbed. I've operated on them. I've seen them when they come into hospital. And I've seen from the inside the damage that a knife can do. And knives can be very deceptive, because even a small, clean-looking wound on the outside can do enormous damage on the inside. Because inside our bodies, all the organs, all the structures are really closely packed. There's no space between them. Arteries, veins, nerves, organs. And so anywhere a knife goes, it's going to do really serious damage. It causes mayhem. There is no safe place in the body to stab someone. But being stabbed isn't just physical. I saw people who'd been stabbed from my perspective as operating on their bodies. But of course, that's only part of the picture, because each knife has a blade and a handle. Each knife has two sides. And I've been thinking about the experience of people who are stabbed. This young man was typical of the patients I would see, where, to begin with, they looked sort of almost puzzled, bewildered, hadn't quite sunk in what had happened yet, because the pain, although it would come later, the pain hadn't really kicked in yet. And there was that sense of astonishment, of only just starting to process something that would take a really long time to come to terms with. But this is not one of my patients. This is not a real patient at all. This is a half life-size model made by the artist Ron Mueck at an exhibition that I saw in London a few years ago. But I think it's very moving, because it shows to me these two sides of knife injury, what it looks like physically and what it's like mentally. And a lot of young people carry knives because they want to be protected, and they think that a knife is going to do that. But actually, that's not the case at all. Because if you carry a knife, you're much more likely to be injured than if you don't, and quite often it's your own knife that does the damage. And of course, things can get out of control very quickly. So even if you go out of the house with a knife thinking you'll just have it in case you ever need it, you can quickly get into a situation where things get out of control. And we know that our brains really only settle down, only mature, by the time we're in our mid-20s. And before that, it's very difficult for young people to have a sense of what lies ahead, a sense of consequences. And things happen in the heat of the moment, and they can very quickly get out of control. And when that happens, people get hurt. And so, as I say, each knife has two ends, a blade and a handle, and that means that there are two pathways if there's a knife in the picture, and neither of them is good. So if you're stabbed, the pathway looks like this. If you're lucky and you survive the stabbing, somebody will probably call 999. You're lying there in the street. Very quickly these days, ambulance paramedics will come onto the scene, and they'll look after you. They'll give you first aid if you need it. They'll take you into their ambulance, and then they'll rush you to hospital with the blue light. And then you'll very quickly be on the operating table, being looked after by a team of expert surgeons, nurses, anaesthetists, and people who will probably save your life. But even if they do save your life, you will be left with life-changing consequences. It may be that you can't walk properly, that you've got to poo into a bag. All sorts of bad things can happen, and that will affect not only you, but of course your family. If you're on the other end of the knife, if you're on the end of the handle, it's another sequence of events, although they're very different, because it's arrest, it's custody, it's going to court. It might be a youth court. If somebody's been killed, it might be a crown court like the Old Bailey. And then if you're found guilty, you'll go to prison, probably for longer than you've been alive. And again, it's not only your life, it's the life of your family, your friends, that gets completely mangled. And something that a lot of people don't know is that if you are in a group of people that sets out to do damage to somebody else with a knife, even though you have never touched that knife at all, you are held equally responsible. It's called joint enterprise, and it means that you will go to prison for the same length of time as all the other people in the group. So this is a really scary thing. It's not at all like it looks on TV. It's not glamorous, it's not exciting, it's not bright. And what basically happens if you're found guilty and you go to prison is that all of a sudden, click, out go all the lights, and you're away from everybody you've known, your family, your friends, you're alone, you're with people you've never met, and you're there for years. So how do we try and help young people make sense of this and not get involved? And we know that there's no quick fix, that telling people what to do, what not to do doesn't work, lecturing doesn't work. What we really need to do is to have conversations with young people, to get them to understand what some of these things are, so that in the heat of the moment, when things are happening very quickly, they're better equipped to make good, safe decisions than to get involved in what I've just described. And so I'm going to tell you now about a project that I'm leading at Imperial College London, the university where I work, with a lot of colleagues. And it's called our simulation-based holistic approach to reducing and preventing knife crime, which is a huge mouthful, so we call it SHARP for short. And so SHARP is our word for this project. And I'm going to tell you what we do in the way that we're trying to show young people what happens, and we're trying to explore what that makes them feel, and how they can talk to us about that. And then we want to also inspire them, give them ideas about other sort of career paths they might take, other things they might do as they grow up. We've heard a lot about that. And over the last 2 or 3 years, we've worked with almost 600 young people, quite young, mostly between 11 and 14, 15, 16, that sort of age, in 15 schools and a couple of youth clubs across London. And we've seen each of those young people twice. And I'm going to show you what we do. We show them Adam's journey. Adam's the name we give to a young man we've worked with. That's not his real name, but he's told us all about the experience that he went through when he got stabbed. He was stabbed completely unexpectedly by 3 people who stole his bike. To this day, he doesn't know who they were. They stabbed him many times, gave him very serious injuries. He went to hospital, as I've told you. They stitched him up, they patched him up, they repaired the damage, but what they weren't able to repair was what it's made him feel. So as well as being lame, as having all sorts of physical things wrong with him, he gets nightmares. He's not sure whether they're going to come back and stab him again. He doesn't know who they are. It's completely changed his world. And that was a couple of years ago. So we've developed 2 ways of looking at Adam's story. And the first one is to show his experience through virtual reality. So we developed a 7-minute virtual reality experience. And you can see one of our young people with a headset. And they watch Adam's story, they hear him talk about it, and they see those steps from the outside. The ambulance, the operating theatre, what happens afterwards. And then we talk to them. We try and see what they made of it. And we do something very unusual then. We work with a very talented medical artist, Merlin Evans, who invites the young people to make marks, just make marks with black ink on white paper, and then cut those up and stick them onto bits of orange card. They don't have to be good at art or have done anything to do with art before, but they create these images that to me are incredibly moving because of what they show. So here's one of them. This is about witnessing. This is about what it's like to watch a friend of yours get stabbed. This is another one. This is about what happens when somebody's killed. And of all the 600 people we worked with, about 70%, more than about 2/3 of them, had had direct first-hand experience of knife injury. Someone in the family, one of their friends, somebody at school, occasionally even the young people themselves. And some of those had died. And this is the person's soul disappearing from their body after their body's died and they've been stabbed. This is about feeling trapped between two really difficult alternatives, being in a place that you can't get out of. This one's about knives themselves, about sharp objects. Of course, we're talking about knives that stab people, but there are knives that heal people. I'm a surgeon. I use knives all the time to open people up, to repair damage, to put them back together again. And then there's that sense of all that stuff that you can't put into words that's going on all around you. But you can't really make sense of it because it's something you feel but can't describe. So that's what we did to begin with. Groups of 10 at schools all across London. And then a few weeks or months later, when the young people had had time to sort of process what we'd shown them, to think about it a bit, to talk about it with their friends, we brought them back again in groups of 40 with a big team of our own to show them what actually happens when somebody gets stabbed. So at the bottom of the picture, well, in the middle of the picture, you see Adam, played by an actor. He's been stabbed, he's on the ground. At the bottom of the picture is an ambulance. You can just see it. Left-hand side of the picture, an operating theatre. Right-hand side of the picture, a post-operative ward where he goes after his surgery. And I'm going to show you those for a minute or two. So the first thing that happens is Adam's stabbed, a bystander calls 999, and as I say, very quickly, an ambulance crew come. And these are actual paramedics from the London Ambulance Service coming out of an ambulance and giving him assistance. They take him into their ambulance. A few minutes later, they whiz through the London traffic and they arrive at hospital. And then the next thing we see is Adam having an operation. So the lead surgeon is in the middle there. On her left is the scrub nurse. On the right, another assistant, and then an anaesthetist, keeping Adam safely asleep while the surgical team work to find out what's going on. And then afterwards, we pick up the story the next day when Adam wakes up from his anaesthetic and his mum has come to see him. It's the first she knows about it, first that she knows that he was even in hospital. And he's finding out from the surgeon that although they saved his life, they've had to create what's called a colostomy, which is bringing out the intestine onto the surface of his body, so he'll have to poo into a bag. It's a huge change, and it's very difficult to come to terms with that. And just on the left there, you can see a stoma nurse, an expert, who's helping Adam and his mum to work out what this means for them. And then we invited the young people to go and spend time with each of the groups of professionals, with the paramedics, to have an experience of what it's like to be part of a surgical team, to be working with a surgeon, holding instruments, being part of that group. And then what it was like to have to explain to somebody something that they weren't expecting, that's happened out of the blue, and now they're having to try and make sense of what's happened. And then finally, we invited a couple of young ambassadors, as we call them, the two young men standing up facing us here, who have themselves, like Adam, been stabbed. And they're able to talk to the young people about not only what it felt like in terms of pain, but what it felt like for them emotionally, all the difficult things they had to go through. And so that's what we've been doing so far in showing what happens in the health service when you get stabbed. But what we now want to do is something that I don't think has ever been done before, not in this way anyway, which is to show alongside this the other side of the picture. What happens if you're in the group of people holding the knife? And as I say, that's the police, that's the courts, it's magistrates, it's barristers, it's judges, it's all kinds of professionals in that part of the system. And so what we want to do now is to show that the justice system, to show what happens, and also to invite young people to come and get to know people in the police, in the magistrates' world, in the judges with the solicitors, so that they develop a sense of a bit more understanding and a bit of trust, really, in a system that a lot of people see as being often against them. So, for me, there are really three key messages here that we want to get across to the young people we've been working with. One is that carrying a knife does not protect you Quite the reverse. It makes you much more likely to be injured, to be stabbed yourself, possibly even killed. That there's no safe place in the body to stab someone. You cannot know what direction the knife is going to go in after it's entered somebody's body, and wherever it goes, it does huge damage. There is no safe part of the body to stab someone. And finally, if you get involved in a group of people where somebody gets stabbed, even if you yourself have never touched that knife, you are held equally responsible in law, and that can completely ruin your life and the lives of your families and your friends, just as much as if you've been stabbed. So what we want is that young person that you might have seen on this evening's news has got home safely instead. Thank you.